We're going to talk about the buzzword du jour, candidate engagement. I want to start by really defining what candidate engagement means, because it could be a bit different to all of us. And I'm going to pose the question to Katy and Elliot as far as what does it mean to them. But I wanted to kind of start with really defining when does it start and when does it end? What is the life cycle of candidate engagement? Also, how much customized communication and processes need to be developed specific to a certain brand to attract the right talent? And then thirdly, how do we make it easy for candidates to interact with our company? How do we make it very simple, almost like a very, very eloquent shopping experience? So, you know, Katy, what does it mean to you, candidate engagement?
I think to pick up on Elliot's points about the experience and when this starts, for me, it really begins when someone recognizes your brand. So when I'm at an event here in Houston and I say I'm with NCI or NCI Building Systems, I no longer get MCI like the old phone company, but I do get some looks sometimes like, oh, who's NCI? Well, I get an opportunity then to tell them a little bit about who we are and what we do. But making sure that the brand reputation is out there and it's known. Of course, in our industry, people know NCI Building Systems, but in many cases, they know the brands that we go to market by. So NCI, we go to market as NCI infrequently. So in local marketplaces, and we're recruiting all across North America, potential candidates may know us as Metallic or Star or MBCI or Metal Depots. They don't know us as NCI. So trying to figure out how to communicate this story around who we are as an entire enterprise, as well as connect that to the customer-facing brand is really important for us. So we're back to this idea of bringing marketing and HR together. We're focused on how we do that in the local marketplaces so that candidates know the name, recognize the name, and see not only the value in the local brand or the plant signage that they see when they're driving down the highway, but can also connect that to a much larger enterprise, which from an engagement point of view and gathering people's hearts and minds, there's a much bigger purpose when you put all of our companies together. And that bigger purpose, to Elliot's point, is one of the key elements in driving employee commitment and engagement.
Katy, does that, and we can talk more in detail about this, but does that happen through the onboarding process? Is that where a bulk of that happens? And then are things done to reinforce that along the way through their employment journey?
Yes, now, I wouldn't say we've perfected this, but our intent is that, yes, it starts in the onboarding process, and it continues throughout the life cycle, whether it's seeing this again in a performance appraisal or for a professional employee in a development plan later on. All of these things start coming back together again. Who are we? What is our purpose? What are our core values? And how does that tie us all together as one company? We also started something as goofy as this may sound perhaps to some of you, when we created this NCI brand, if you will, about 3 years ago, I guess about 2 years ago now, December of 2015, we gave all of our employees throughout the world an NCI T-shirt. So they've been affiliated with these other brands, the go-to-market brands, and so we gave everyone a T-shirt that had the NCI logo on the front and then our new mission statement on the back. And now it's become a tradition. So we're just in the process of shipping our T-shirts this year. This is the third T-shirt that we've done. This year it'll have our mission statement. Last year it was our core values on the back. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I walk out into one of our plants in the middle of Iowa and I see half of the employees with one of these NCI T-shirts on, I feel like the word's getting out. The message is there, and people are feeling connected to this bigger company. And that really helps us. Back to the onboarding piece, that really helps us because people can see that connection to something more than a local plant with 150 people.
Absolutely. So, Elliot, you've not only had the opportunity to, play a key role in building up an early on powerhouse RPO, but you've pretty much spent your career trying to just make recruitment better. How do you define employee engagement?
Well, I think Katy did a great job. I don't have a whole lot to add to that. But I did jot down the idea because I'm going to steal it and do it with our employees. I think that the reality is that when we use the word engagement, whether we're talking about employees or candidates, it's about something more than we used to use 25, 30 years ago. The idea they talk about employee satisfaction, and what we figured out is that might not be the best thing, because if you have a whole lot of lazy people and you don't ask them to do a lot, they can be very satisfied, right? So what we wanted is that we wanted people to be engaged, and engagement means they're willing to not only do their job but care and do more. So when I use the word engagement, I'm actually talking about an emotional context that not necessarily the people fret about the company like they would their children, but that they feel an emotional attachment to the mission, that they believe in it. Right. The best example to use on the counter side is if someone called you today and said, "Hey, Cory, we want you to take over talent acquisition for we're going to reinvigorate Enron." That doesn't sound very exciting, right? You don't believe in the business. It's a corrupt organization. Who wants to be part of that? All right. But if someone calls you and says, "Hey, we help speed the building of schools and hospitals. We make sure the roof isn't going to fall in. We're NCI systems, building systems." That then has a context, if you're in the construction or architectural trades, to say, "Hey, that sounds like a good business and one that I want to take part in." So that's what part of what Katy's message is probably more complex than that. So I think of it as being able to express your values and your mission in a way that makes the employee care and want to be part of it. People, I think, have an innate, we're social animals, have a desire to be part of something greater than themselves individually, and that company sort of definition of value and mission is what really drives engagement.
I concur, absolutely, which brings us to a audience participation poll. We'd like to know from you, who owns the candidate engagement strategy in your company? Whose job is it to make sure candidates have a great experience during the recruiting process? And for that matter, who ultimately owns that measurement or that initiative? We're going to take a few minutes for you guys to click in your answers. And so while I'm waiting, Katy, I probably know this answer, but who owns it in your organization at NCI?
Well, sometimes I have to look at myself and say, why aren't you doing that better? From my HR hat to my marketing hat. But it truly is a shared responsibility. And Cory, you know this because you've been on this journey with us for the last couple of years and implementing recruitment process outsourcing. Prior to 2 years ago, all of our recruiting was handled by the managers. So with the exception of a handful of searches that we did out of the corporate office with a part-time recruiter who really just coordinated search firms, most of the recruiting was done directly by the managers, so they weren't used to involving anyone else. My point of this is they feel a great sense of ownership for this process because they owned it previously. So our challenge over the last 2 years has been, how do we help them get better, provide them with resources and support to get better candidates in faster, and allow them to focus more on the onboarding later and keeping and retaining the employees longer term. So it's still very much a shared responsibility amongst all of us, the managers, the marketing team, and the HR team.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody owns responsibility for this. I think the question becomes more who drives and plans it, right? So, I look at the idea of the candidate engagement strategy and saying that it's really a combination of marketing or branding, and that may sit in HR or not, and the HR department to plan it. But you know, if you tell hiring managers they don't own it, you could wind up breaking some eggs.
That's right. I totally agree.
Absolutely. And you know, the old phrase of people don't go to work for companies, they go to work for people. That's true to some aspect. I mean, people personally work peer-to-peer with their manager or those around them, and that's heavily important. But brand consciousness and company, some sort of company feel-good or company aura is very important to candidates. It's critical that candidates work for a company that has a reputation, and that reputation is consistent through their dealings with their management and their peers and other folks in the organization. All right, are we all in on the poll? All right, so the survey is in. We're close here on who owns the candidate engagement strategy. HR and shared responsibility is what we see here, is what you guys put in there. I can see absolutely. I think HR can drive a lot of the engagement because, you know, they're in the epicenter of people. And but it is absolutely a shared responsibility, and we're going to talk more about that here. So the million-dollar question, does better candidate engagement contribute to better employee engagement and ultimately retention? Yes, we know there is a link. We see it across our long-term RPO clients. We see it not only from the attitudes of the candidates through candidate experience and through hiring manager surveys and candidate surveys and things like that, but we also see it down the line in performance reviews and longer-term retention studies, maybe even promotions and things of that nature. So we know there is a link. Katy, is there a link here at NCI?
I can't say there is not a link.
Okay.
I believe there is a link. We are just, as you know, in our RPO relationship, we are just starting to do more quality measures. So are the hires we've been making over the last 18 months sticking, and by the way, anecdotally they are, but we want to make sure we have some data and some facts. And we're also just launching a Voice of the Employee project. Last year we launched a Voice of the Customer program with Net Promoter Score, and we're taking a similar approach for employees, and we'll be launching that. So I think the combination of the data that we've been collecting from a talent acquisition perspective around candidate engagement and retention quality will align nicely with the Voice of the Employee data that we're pulling. And then when we do this again in a year, I can give you some facts to say, yes, absolutely, it's working.
Good. Well, data is absolutely critical. Measuring what matters is more critical, and engagement matters. So let's look at some steps that, or some best practices among HR folks, recruiters, and various team members that candidates ultimately interact with. We'll call them the 3 C's: culture, communication, and clarity. It's important to start early promoting culture with candidates and get them thinking about why they would want to work for you ultimately, and why they would not only want to work for you, but they're going to like working for you, and they're going to perform better working for you. I think that's important as well. So connectors to your employment brand and your corporate brand all feed into the culture. Building culture into the recruiting process and continuing the conversation post-hire through onboarding programs, through reinforcing activities, through sending NCI T-shirts once a year around the world. things like that promote the culture. So as you guys build your culture, Katy, and ultimately, you know, you're spearheading a lot of that through marketing, and you own HR. The recruiting process, I know we're doing a lot of things differently, and there's a lot more data that we have now, and we're kind of in the infancy stages of really, you know, implementing something. But how important is that building culture into that engagement piece, into that front door? So from the time they either look at the NCI careers page or they engage with the NCI recruiter all the way through, how important is that to you?
That's very, very important. In fact, if you go all the way back to the point at which we selected our RPO provider, Orion Novotus, part of the criteria we looked at when we were selecting our partner was a good cultural fit. And there are a lot of great firms out there, and I've used other firms in other lives. And for us, at this time, at this company, with this culture, your company was the best fit because your values really aligned well with ours. And so the people, and this doesn't say that an RPO can't hire in recruiters to fit somebody else's culture other than their own, but both your culture and ours aspirationally were very much aligned, and so that was really important to us. And then during the recruiting process, we have our managers now interviewing for a cultural fit. So again, something that probably most of us on the webinar have been doing for years, it was new for us. And we've asked everyone across the company to hire for this commitment to excellence, for a strong sense of personal responsibility, and people who are focused on delivering an exceptional customer experience. And so that's really helped us in building the brand, making sure the people we're bringing in fit this new set of aspirational core values. And then the other piece is around the measurement. So we're always trying to make better decisions, starting with the data. So asking the questions, getting the data, and then making really informed decisions. And so one of the other benefits of working with our partnership is that we suddenly have more data. And hopefully next year when we have our new HCM in place, we'll be able to, and the Voice of the Employee initiative, pull all of this together and have even richer data, you know, data with more texture so people can make even better decisions going forward. So that measurement piece is really important, and it continues to prove the ROI and the RPO relationship.
Thanks, Katy.